news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host Adam Keller is out this week spreading the gospel of solidarity. In his place, we have Ben Job filling in. Today, a socialist labor lawyer is taking conservative political commentator Steven Crowder to labor court. And he comes on the show to break it down for us. A union leader wins the presidency of Senegal. Adam gives you the latest on Alabama's SB 231. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number, and the line is open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might answer it on the next program. If you want to leave a short comment, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook at The Valley Labor Report and be a part of the program. Just a reminder, if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and get Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch in your inbox every single week. You can also go to our store and buy our merch. We have shirts and hats for sale. Our hats are supposed to come in on Tuesday, so we will be mailing those out next week, so make sure that you get yours. TVLR.fm/store. We also have a donation portal that is a union payment processing service. How many of those are there? Not many, but we have one. TVLR.fm/donate to make a one-time or monthly recurring contribution. And just a reminder that your support does help us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So TVLR.fm/donate if you would like to help us stay on the air. And if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do this without the support of organized labor.
And with that, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on the YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio out of Huntsville here, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, big ups for the new spot over there, or throughout your podcast app. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our users to check that out. And as most of y'all know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists over here in Alabama, here representing the South's labor movement and saying that the working class deserves a bigger platform.
Let's go ahead and jump right into Last Week in Southern Labor. Here's what U.S. workers in the South and the American colonies were up to from March 29th to April 5th. In new union campaigns, we had 226 workers at the District of Columbia International School, a charter school in D.C. They filed a petition to hold a union election with the D.C. local of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT. ADT. 600 workers at Hearthside Food Solutions in London, Kentucky filed a petition to hold a union election with the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union, BCTGM Local 57. 26 workers at Jewish Family Services in St. Louis, Missouri filed a petition to hold a union election with the Communication Workers of America, CWA Local 6400. 101 workers at Austin Pets Alive in Austin, Texas filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 291 workers at Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana filed a petition to hold a union election with Workers United. 53 workers at Miami City Ballet in Miami Beach, Florida filed a petition to hold a union election with the American Guild of Musical Artists. 3 security guards at Kerberos International in Arlington, Virginia filed a petition to hold a union election with the Security, Police, and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA, in what appears to be a raid of another union. 3 security guards at Maxent in Arlington, Virginia filed a petition to hold a union election with the SPFPA. 59 workers at Livingston Place at Southern Avenue in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with 1199 SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East. 20 workers at Akima Systems Engineering in Panama City Beach, Florida filed a petition to hold a union election with the IAMAW. 25 workers at Liberty Communications of Puerto Rico in San Juan, Puerto Rico filed a petition to hold a union election with the CWA. 15 security guards at Allied Universal in Tampa, Florida filed a petition to hold a union election with the SPFPA. 30 workers at Hospital Metropolitano de Cabo Rojo in Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Labor Unit of Nurses and Health Employees. 10 security guards at Martinez and Company in Tampa, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the SPFPA. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the Laborers Local 12 as the union representing 14 workers at the Rogers Group in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 16 workers at Starbucks in Springfield, Virginia, demonstrated support for unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 204 workers at Capital City Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the D.C. local of AFT. 140 workers at Radial in Locust Grove, Louisiana filed a petition to hold a union election with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU Southeast Council. In campaign updates, Republican politicians in Tennessee are urging Volkswagen workers to vote no in their union election with the UAW, scheduled for April 17th to 19th. 5,200 workers at Mercedes-Benz in Vance, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Auto Workers less than 3 weeks after the Volkswagen workers filed and less than 3 months after the Alabama workers began their public campaign. If the Volkswagen timeline is any indicator, the election will likely take place sometime in early May. In election results, the one worker at Allpoint Logistics withdrew the petition for a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 2088, after just filing the petition last week. 16 workers at Arrow's Edge in Cherry Point, North Carolina, withdrew their petition for a union election with the IAMAW. 7 workers at ESG Operations in Fort Benning, Georgia, withdrew their petition for a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE Local 926. 20 workers at Crescent Paper Tube Company in Lewisport, Kentucky, voted 16-4 in favor of unionization with the United Steelworkers, USW. 14 workers at Starbucks in Little Rock, Arkansas, voted 12-2 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 21 workers at Starbucks in Sulphur, Louisiana, voted unanimously in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 34 workers at the International Brotherhood of Teamsters in Washington, D.C., voted 12-16 against unionization with the Washington Baltimore News Guild Local 32035. 161 workers at Transdev in Arlington, Virginia, voted 103-1 in favor of unionization with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 689. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, last week workers filed unfair labor practice charges against Mercedes. This week, they filed charges against them in Germany as well, alleging that the company's anti-union tactics violate German trade law. In strikes and bargaining updates, UAW President Shawn Fain kicked off negotiations with Daimler, a truck and bus manufacturer, where the UAW has 7,000 members across 3 southern states, at a big rally in North Carolina last week, hitting many similar notes to the ones that he was hitting during the Big 3 contract negotiations. The United Campus Workers of South Carolina, representing workers at the University of South Carolina, held a rally to demand higher wages with a petition signed by 1,000 folks. The Kansas City residents voted overwhelmingly against giving billions of dollars to the Kansas City Royals to build a new stadium after the developers refused to agree to a community benefits agreement that would have ensured local hiring, higher wages, etc. in construction of the stadium. The Vote No campaign, led by workers and tenant groups, was outspent by the developers 50-1 and still won the election. The Biden Federal Railroad Administration announced a new rule to mandate a minimum of 2-person crews on the rails, a longtime demand of rail workers and their unions. The bill loosening child labor laws in Alabama passed with almost unanimous support in the state House, including from House Democrats, only 3 of whom voted against it. Voting in favor of the Democrats voting in favor was Marilyn Lands, the newly elected Huntsville Democrat, despite her having voiced opposition to the bill on this show before her election. Alabama politicians launched another volley of attacks against the UAW last week, including Mike Rogers, Gary Palmer, and Kay Ivey, ostensibly incensed that Shawn Fain hit back against their smears on the union and Alabama workers. The Alabama Senate bill that would remove incentives from companies that voluntarily recognize their workers' union passed through committee on a party line vote last week. It will be on the Senate floor for a full vote on Tuesday. In internal union affairs, Unite Here International President Dee Taylor is stepping down after what has been, by all accounts, a successful presidency, adding over 100,000 new union members during his tenure in mostly right-to-work states. If you have anything that we left out, let us know, tvlr.fm/contact, and we will include it in the next roundup. We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back with our interview with Matt Bruenig about his case that he is bringing against conservative political commentator Steven Crowder. Don't go anywhere. Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth shall go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host Adam Keller is out this week. Filling in for him is Ben Job. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. So, got a really interesting for you out of Senegal. The prison to presidency pipeline. That's what some are calling the meteoric rise of the new leader of Senegal, Bassirou Diomaye Faye. Faye was sworn in as president only a couple of weeks after being released from prison, where he was serving a sentence because of the crime of criticizing government officials on Facebook. Yes, that is really why he was imprisoned. In addition to being imprisoned, the political party and the momentum behind the opposition to the ruling party of Senegal, which was the African Patriots of Senegal for Work, Ethics, and Fraternity, PASTEF, was declared illegal and dissolved by the government, while jailing another leader of the party, Ousmane Sonko. Unlike Fay, in the government's frame-up of Sonko, they convicted him of crimes that barred him from running for president. Sonko was actually apparently kind of like the leader, right? Fay was kind of behind him, but they imprisoned Sonko and made it such that he was not allowed to be on the ballot. Well, even though Fay was imprisoned, they did allow him to be on the ballot, and so Fay was the one that ended up running for president for the now illegal PASTEF, but he was able to be on the ballot, as sort of an independent figure. And the party, even though it was declared illegal and dissolved by the government, continued operations and campaigning and things like this. The party was founded by young civil servants who were unhappy with the corruption in the government. The ideology of the party, from what I can tell, is not terribly clear or precise, but is generally left-wing, anti-corruption, good governance kind of stuff. That's kind of the center of the party, being founded by young civil servants, right? It was not, which is kind of a funny dynamic to imagine in this country where the type of working people that are, fetishized is maybe too strong of a word, but idolized in the public consciousness is not, we derogatorily call workers like that, workers like myself, the PMC, professional managerial class, kind of clickety-clack desk workers who do administrative tasks for the government, things like this. And yet, that was the group that kind of spearheaded this, pro-democracy, anti-corruption, left-wing movement. So that's kind of just, that was interesting to me, coming from this country where, as I said, the PMC is generally kind of demonized, and yet they were the leaders of this movement in that country. The father of Fay, now the president, Fay is now the president. His father was a lifelong member of the Socialist Party of Senegal. The success of the new movement, PASTEF, seems to have been driven by the charisma, youth, and anti-establishment bent of the 44-year-old government worker turned political prisoner turned president in the country where, get this, 60% of the population is under 25. That is bonkers. For reference, only 44% of the United States is under the age of 34, right? So this is a dramatically younger set of demographics in Senegal than we have in the United States. And for people who study history, having a whole bunch of young people running society kind of it lends itself to more drastic changes. And we've kind of seen that here in Senegal. Importantly for our program, Bassirou Diomaye Faye was a member of a union of government employees in Senegal, the Taxes and Estates Union. He, along with Sonko, was a tax inspector. So there you go. That's an interesting story. I thought that y'all might would like to hear. It's a bright spot, where other countries in Africa are seeing right-wing coups. This country saw a left-wing union leader head up a movement against the right-wing establishment and win. So that was pretty exciting news. Sean Orr, a Teamster from Chicago, shared that on Twitter. That's where I saw it. So I was pretty excited to see that. Thought y'all might be interested. Matt Bruenig is from the People's Policy Project, and he is a labor attorney. And last week he announced that he is taking Steven Crowder to court. So over alleged violations of labor law. So I said, wow, that is super in our wheelhouse. We have to bring him on the show to talk about that. And so that's what we did. I pre-taped this conversation with Matt yesterday. He was not able to be on the show today, so we pre-taped it yesterday. And let's go ahead and play that interview with Matt Bruenig. All right, folks, I am here with Matt Bruenig of the People's Policy Project and his new project, NLRB Edge, where he is going through the NLRB cases and kind of trying to make some of the legalese a little bit more palatable and understandable to normal folks because, I think it has a really big impact on folks' lives, understanding the rights that they can have at work and being able to make use of them. He is is recently kind of in the zeitgeist because he's bringing an unfair labor practice charge against Steven Crowder on behalf of a former employee, Jared Monroe. Stage name, formerly Not Gay Jared, no longer goes by that stage name. That's what he went by on the Steven Crowder show. And so wanted to talk to him about that. But before we get into that, I guess if you could give us just, a little bit more into NLRB Edge and why you wanted to do that project and some of the things that we can look for going forward.
Yeah, so NLRB Edge, NLRBEdge.com. Basically, before I was doing that, I was doing a lot of policy stuff, a lot of social benefits stuff at People's Policy Project. And that stuff has kind of, when Bernie Sanders was running and the first part of the Biden administration, that was a hot topic. A lot of people writing about it, a lot of interest, and that interest has kind of waned a little bit. And so I've kind of gone back to my roots, which was as a labor lawyer, and said, hey, let's do some NLRB stuff. The NLRB is doing a lot of interesting things. And then my other thought on that was there are services that you can follow that will kind of summarize what's going on at the NLRB. Those services are very expensive and they're targeted at lawyers. And so my thought was, well, maybe there's a niche here for people, regular people who are interested in unions enough that they might want to follow this. And I can make it simple, fairly brief. The little daily things I send out are not that long, and maybe reach a wider audience that could get use from this, that are not just looking to practice in front of the NLRB, but maybe use some of these insights in their own, workplaces.
Right. And I think that you do a very good job of making things easy to understand. I don't know if that's kind of just the way that you write or the way that you speak, or if that's a purposeful choice that you're making. But I've always thought that kind of the Chomsky model of, if you can't make things understandable to the average person, then generally speaking, people should be suspicious. And I think you do a good job of making things kind of understandable. So I think it's a great work that you're doing on NLRB Edge. And, for what it's worth, if people want to check out some of your policy stuff, it's still out there, and it is similarly digestible and easy to understand and very persuasive. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the case that you're bringing against Steven Crowder. Give folks who don't know the story behind it, can you give us just the background on what was going on in this universe?
Yeah, so Steven Crowder, is a very famous right-wing kind of streamer, and he has 5.8 million YouTube viewers. He's kind of the big dog in that area. One story I remember from him, maybe a year ago or so, there was stories about him being upset that Daily Wire had only offered him $50 million. So
called it a slave contract.
Yeah, so that's that's where he is. Very prominent guy. But 6 years ago, he employed my client Jared Monroe as a producer on his show, and they parted ways. And after they parted ways, they entered into a separation agreement, which a lot of people do, sometimes called a severance agreement. And that separation agreement includes this clause that just kind of says, one, everything in this agreement is confidential, and two, sort of in the most broadest language, you cannot disparage Crowder or Louder with Crowder, which is his show. And there's no time limit on that. So in theory, he's supposed to have signed away his ability to say anything about Crowder for the rest of his life. But, for 6 years, things, I don't know, nothing really came of it, I suppose, at least that particular clause. There was some tension between the two of them in other areas. But when Hillary Crowder, which was Steven's wife, began divorcing Steven after a rather viral video of Steven, what would you say? Trying to make sure I don't say anything disparaging here, but berated her and said very, very negative things to her that she seemed to think was abusive. So she starts divorcing him. And then around this time, I guess Jared is friends with Hillary, Jared, my client. And, they maybe start talking just kind of as friends would do. You know, you might reach out to someone if they were getting a divorce, and this has upset Crowder. And so he has brought this lawsuit claiming that Jared Monroe has breached this non-disparagement clause.
And so your argument then is, you know, and there's a lot of things that could be discussed, I think, regarding the legal controversies between Hillary and Stephen, but I think we'll keep it pretty tight to the non-disparagement clause as it relates to Jared. Your argument is that clause is illegal and should therefore be nullified. And so explain that to us. How can it be that, you know, I mean, Jared signed it, right? I mean, doesn't that mean that that's just, you know, he signed it? So how can that not be valid?
Right. So under the National Labor Relations Act, you know, Section 7 says that you have a right to engage in concerted activity for the purposes of mutual aid and protection. And that right includes, as long as you do it with a coworker, including former coworkers, criticizing working conditions, criticizing former managers, saying, you know, this is a mean boss, this is a boss who mistreats you, whatever. You have a right to do that even as a former employee. And so any clause, whether it's in a contract, whether it's in a handbook, whether it's in an employment agreement, whether it's a company policy, whatever, they don't really distinguish. Any kind of rule that a regular person would read and say, oh, it looks like I can't do X, where X is something you have a right to do, that rule is illegal on its face. And if you bring a charge to the board, they will require the company to rescind that rule. And as far as, you know, well, it's a contract. I mean, this kind of goes back from the very beginning of the NLRA. I think the case that they always cite on this is 1940 Republican Aviation. But you know, a lot of what we're doing with labor regulation was trying to blow up contracts that employers would require their employees to sign. The most famous one, of course, the Yellow Dog contract, saying where you would agree not to join a union. So obviously, if we start saying, well, anything you agree to is good to go, well, the employers would be able to make you agree to not join a union. And this is essentially the same kind of thing. Joining a union is something you have a right to do. Therefore, you can't waive that right, just as criticizing your boss, as long as you keep it focused on working conditions and with coworkers, is a right, and you can't waive that. So it's the same exact structure as that sort of Yellow Dog contract stuff, which I think people who follow labor in any capacity know about that stuff. So,
was Hillary also employed by Louder with Crowder at one point?
She was not, as far as I know.
And so then because the rule does not carve out an exception for talking about working conditions with employees, but it's a broad rule that says, you know, you cannot disparage with anybody. And so anybody therefore includes former employees, then the whole rule is null. Is that accurate?
Exactly right. So it doesn't have to be that the specific thing that they're mad about is of a protected activity, right? The rule itself is a violation, just as if an employer were to say something like, now you guys better not unionize, I don't want you unionizing, or whatever. Even if you never did actually unionize, the statement would be a violation of the NLRA. So it's a little bit of a creative move here, but basically you say, look, the contract, the clause itself is a violation of the NLRA, whether it's ever enforced at all. You don't even need a lawsuit. You could just bring a charge against that clause existing. The clause itself violates the NLRA. The remedy for that is to rescind the clause. If you rescind the clause, then of course you can't bring a breach of contract claim against it.
So then is there precedent for a clause being struck in its entirety by the NLRB over that was being acted upon for something that would in and of itself maybe not be illegal, like, because as I'm understanding it, and you know, I think you'll be able to help me, as I'm understanding it, not actually necessarily illegal that, NDAs I know are not illegal wholesale, right? And so you could have an NDA potentially that says, Jared Monroe, you're not allowed to talk to Hillary Crowder, that would be the effect of the rule. That effect is not necessarily illegal, but the rule is, encompasses things that would be illegal, and so the whole rule is struck down. Is there a precedent for the NLRB striking down a rule in that manner, where it's trying to be enforced for something the enforcement action would potentially be legal, and yet, because it also restricts legal activity, the whole rule is null, and there can be no enforcement action based on that rule?
Yeah. So you're very sharp on this because, this is an issue they've had to deal with. There's a case called Double Eagle that kind of sets the rules on this. And conceptually, what you want to do is distinguish between two unfair labor practices. The clause is an unfair labor practice, and then the enforcement of it would be a second unfair labor practice. So the question you're asking is, okay, let's say the clause itself as it's written is an unfair labor practice. Okay, now, so that's one, you would win that, but then they also enforced the clause, but the enforcement of it was not against protected activity, right? The activity that they enforced it against would not normally be protected, right? That's the situation. And there's this case called Double Eagle that deals with all that. Now, what's interesting in this case is, so normally that happens in the context of firing. Most of these cases are about firing someone. So in a situation where you had a clause, like a confidentiality clause, that was overbroad and therefore illegal, and then let's say some worker breached that confidentiality clause, but they didn't do it in the course of protected activity. They just shared some secret information about the company that had nothing to do with working conditions. What the board would typically do in that case is they would say, yep, the clause is illegal, you have to rescind it, but we're not going to reinstate the worker because the way that you applied it against them was not an application against protected activity, right? But in the case where we're dealing with a lawsuit, the premise of the lawsuit is that the clause exists and therefore you breached it. So if you rescind it, then the lawsuit can't continue, right? That's the basic theory. Right. So it's different than if you got fired. It's because the action itself needs the clause to exist for you to bring a breach of it,
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. Is there precedent for that then? Is there precedent for, the throwing out of a lawsuit on the basis of an illegal clause being struck down, even though, the specific enforcement action may not be illegal?
Yeah, so there is a case that I'm aware of called Haynes Mechanical. The trouble with some of these cases is they settle, so as soon as the writing's on the wall, they don't get to the board. But in that case, it went to the NLRB Division of Advice, which is where I used to work. That's where they put their little brain trust of lawyers to deal with tricky brain tingling questions like this. Right. And in that one, they had a confidentiality. No, it was a coworker non-solicitation clause. So there are these rules that say you can't try to solicit your coworker to go work for someone else. So let's say you quit the company and then you're like, hey, you should come work with me at my new company. There are rules that say you can't do that. Now, those rules are illegal on their face, according to the current general counsel. These things go back and forth, right? They're illegal on their face, but only certain kinds of coworker solicitation is actually protected, right? It has to be done in a certain way that relates to mutual aid and protection, right? So you had a case, like you're saying, kind of a perfect situation. The guy leaves, coworker solicits, he does it in a way that's probably not protected activity. They bring a lawsuit against them. The lawyer in that case, who now works for CWA, but was a private lawyer at the time I talked to him, he brings the NLRB charge, does the exact same thing I'm doing, and the employer gives up. So the Division of Advice at the NLRB basically said that, yeah, this is how it would go. This lawsuit is illegal because it seeks to enforce illegal clauses. We would rescind the clause, blah, 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 everything I was just telling you. So it went down that way, but it didn't go up to the board. It settled before that point.
I see. So that's fascinating. And so I think that the legal case there, has been made. I think there's certainly a logical consistency at least, and I think I think that makes sense. But there are some law experts on Twitter that are not convinced actually of your of the case that you're making. I'm trying to see if I can find any of the names, and I'm not. Oh yeah, Robert Barnes.
Robert Barnes.
Yes.
Yeah. First time learning of him, but he's apparently kind of celebrity right-wing lawyer who kind of chases whatever the thing is. I remember someone clarified to me in the comments. They said, he just, what did he replied? He said, "This is not what the law says," or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, I tried to explain to him that it is. And someone replied with, "Robert Barnes, he represented Wesley Snipes, Kyle Rittenhouse, and 8 of the Covington boys." And it's like, okay, so this guy just.
And Ralph Nader.
And Ralph Nader. Okay. Yes, well,
Yeah. So, and as you pointed out, he's also an expert, apparently, on coercive rules under the NLRA. I've got this tweet up to right now. So yeah, I mean, how is it that you feel qualified to disagree with Robert Barnes? I'm not,
I did find that tweet really funny. It you don't want to, I don't come down too hard on regular people, though a lot of people on Twitter are not so regular. But what do people think like a good lawyer looks like? If you know anything about, I don't know, an actual lawyer, if you gave them that list of this person's credentials, one, of course, you would say, okay, this is not a labor lawyer. But 2, you'd be like, this guy is, I don't know what he's doing. He's kind of a nut,
Yeah. Well, okay. So we're just we feel comfortable disagreeing with Robert Barnes is what I'm hearing, least at the very least in this division of the law. So then how is it that Jared came to find you? Obviously you run in somewhat different circles, I think, than Jared does. Politically, certainly, you're not going to be a guest on any of his friends' podcasts, for example. At least not before
maybe now.
Right? Yeah, maybe now you will be, but before now that would have been a strange unless it was for a debate, right? You do debates sometimes. So how is it that you two kind of crossed paths? And then, because he's still conservative. So, him coming to a, socialist labor lawyer to take a case before the NLRB, which many conservatives kind of feel is, prima facie unconstitutional. How did this happen? And he become convinced that this is a good way to go.
Yeah, so he put up a 15-minute video on Twitter where he was trying to raise money for his legal defense because he had been sued and, needed, these lawsuits are very expensive, and he explained his situation. And a lot of people contacted me based on his video saying, is this, this is something you do, right? Because one of the things that I had done just before this case was there were these radio hosts in Dallas, Texas, who quit their radio show and started a podcast, and they got sued for a breach of a non-compete clause and also for breach of non-disparagement and confidentiality and all that. That was in their employment agreement. And I represented them. I did the exact same thing I'm doing in this case. And within 6 or 7 weeks, the company settled, and that was that. So people recognize that. A lot of people email me, including one of the lawyers I worked with on that case, and we're like, isn't this the same basic thing? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, it looks like it is, so I contact him and I'm explaining to him, hey, I just did a case just like this, also in Dallas, which is where the case is taking place, in Collin County there in North Texas. I just did this successfully. So let's talk and let me show you what I could do. And it went from there, and he, he signed up. And I mean, here's the thing, right? He got sued, so he's got to defend himself, so even if maybe whatever you think about unions or the NLRB or whatever, obviously you got to avail yourself of whatever you can to protect yourself when you're getting sued. Now, I mean, I've had conversations with him, certainly, and, right, just because you're conservative on some things doesn't mean you're conservative on everything. I think a lot of what animates the conservative movement right now deals with, I don't know, what do you call like wokeness or social justice or whatever. They're cultural topics. And I think they kind of will also pick up the economic kind of libertarian anti-labor stuff. But I don't know how committed all of them really are to that. Like, that's not really what drives them. And I kind of get that sense from Jared as well. It's sort of like, that's not,
right.
What, everyone has right wing or left wing, the boss can still mistreat you,
Right. And that's one of the beauties of unions. I think, I'm a unionist in Alabama. So obviously, you have to have a pretty high level of tolerance for people with different ideas, as some people would say. So, yeah, I'm appreciative of that. I'm trying to think. This is just such a funny situation. Has Crowder contacted you yet?
I have not heard from Crowder or his lawyers. I was told that, I'm still plugged. I don't really know too much about Crowder Universe, but I'm learning that he's got this lawyer who kind of appears on his show from time to time, that they refer to him as the half Asian lawyer. And he's in like some videos and whatever, and he kind of does their stuff. And his firm is the one that wrote the complaint in the lawsuit. So I guess the point here is I don't think that law firm does NLRB stuff. So I'm wondering when I'm going to hear from Jones Day or whatever, or maybe they'll try to do it. I don't know. It probably would not be ethical to do it if you don't know what you're doing, but.
Well, all right. Well, I'm looking forward to watching the saga unfold, and I'll keep folks up to date on it here on our program. Is there anything else that I haven't hit on that you think that our audience might be interested in around this case?
Yeah, I'd have the spiel about non-disparagement clauses. I think, I'd like to get across to anyone who wants to hear it. But I think, the thing you pointed out at the beginning, which is sort of like, well, someone signed this and, I can say, well, legally that doesn't matter. But I think it's also important to note that one of the problems with these clauses is even if you sign it and even if you try to follow it, that doesn't prevent an employer who wants to be abusive towards you from bringing a lawsuit. And even though they might lose the lawsuit, it can still cost you tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially to defend yourself. And so the clause is just this sort of like, ticking time bomb that if they want to, and anytime they can dip into it and just dump $10,000, $100,000 of costs on you, even if they lose. And when you have employers that have a lot of money, that's not a lot of money to them. They have to pay their lawyers, but it means nothing to them. It's a tiny percentage where that's your whole life savings. So the existence of the clause, even if you are cool with it, and even if you want to follow it, you can cross your employer in some other way, or your former employer in some other way, and then they can use this as leverage to hit you. I mean, this is actually, I think, a great example of this because there's no evidence presented so far that Jared has disparaged Crowder at all. What he didn't like was it appears to me, I'll say my view on it from what I've seen, he had a nasty divorce. He didn't like that some of his friends maybe sided with the wife. And, that happens in divorces and breakups and whatever. People get mad, a lot of hurt feelings. Not a reason to be going into the courts and enforcing separation agreements about non-disparagement, but because it exists, it's a vector that you can use to achieve that. So, yeah, I think they're really bad. I would not recommend signing them. Because even if you're cool with it and you're like, I love my boss, I'll never say anything negative about him. You never know.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's one of the, just generally, I think that's one of the arguments that we have about the importance of unionization and that balance of power in the workplace is that, people say, oh, well, if you've got a good workplace, you got a good boss, you don't need a union. And it's like, well, your boss could die. right, like tomorrow, and then you have a new boss, and who's to say that this new boss is going to be the same or different, in some radical way. People change, right?
It's good until it isn't. And also your boss is me. They've got to answer to their boss, and they're gonna, so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's never great to have just weapons laying out there that can be picked up and used against you at any time, and so especially where they so radically kind of cross with very many people's sensibilities of what seems right. Like I think most people kind of do feel like I have some sort of right to speak freely about, the conditions of my employment or how I feel about a person. And so, just in general, I think that people can kind of get on board with the destruction of these NDAs. There's been conversations in the Biden administration about the, really either as a legitimate form of contract or drastic scaling back. Where are we at with that? Or do you know? You may not be following that. I don't know. No, I mean, I think the non-compete clauses are a big area. NDAs themselves, I think, the NLRB certainly is pushing their angle on it. But, that is limited, and you could write an NDA that wouldn't cover that. As far as, on the federal level, you'd have to pass a law, I would think, in order to make it to where NDAs were unenforceable. There was I don't know if this was there was a law that was passed a couple of years ago about mandatory arbitration when it deals with sexual assault. And a lot of that had to do with NDAs, essentially, right? Because what would happen was employers would force you to bring kind of like sexual harassment claims in arbitration, and then that would be locked down and you couldn't talk about them. And so they kind of blew that up, but that was very narrowly focused on that. But yeah, I mean, the idea that you're going to pass a law blowing them up probably seems pretty improbable now, especially with Republican controlled Congress. So the NLRB angle is kind of the angle of the moment. At least if it's in an employment contract, it's always worth checking to see if maybe there's a way through the NLRB to get it invalidated.
Would there be any concern about, the federal courts overturning an NLRB decision on this? Is this, does this feel to you sound enough ground that even, the kind of conservative judiciary would uphold the ruling?
Yeah, so for employment agreements, if they're in an employment agreement, that has there was a case called Lutheran Heritage that was from 2004, so that would have been a Bush board that set the rule that would have made these things illegal in employment agreements, and that was upheld by court after court after court, even the Fifth Circuit, which is the most conservative court. That got switched. Lutheran Heritage got replaced by this case called Boeing, and then now it's gone back because there's a case called Stericycle. So where that happens at the board, it'll flip back and forth. But that rule, the rule we have now, which is the Stericycle rule, was the Lutheran Heritage rule, and the Lutheran Heritage rule never had any problems in the circuit courts. Now, there is a question, I guess you could try to argue that severance agreements and separation agreements are different from employment agreements because these are like post-employment agreements. In my mind, there's no difference. The current board law is that there's really not difference. And it doesn't really make sense for there to be difference because the word employee, which is the people who are protected by the act, also includes former employees, and that's been recognized by the Supreme Court. So, you never know. You never want to be too bold with these things because sometimes courts just do whatever they want to do. But logically, consistently with sort of the framework of this law, it would be quite a thing to come in and say, well, not for this particular separation agreement or whatever,
Right. All right. Matt Bruenig, NLRBedge.com. Appreciate your time. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yep. There you go, folks. We've got about 50 people watching us live on YouTube right now and only 20 likes on the stream. If you have not liked the stream yet, please do. Also, subscribe to the channel. We've got somebody, Bill, in the chat said, I missed the labor updates. Yeah, we got to those. Already knocked them out, though. But yeah, appreciate everybody tuning in. We have some more big news from Alabama over in Vance with the Mercedes plant. Let's go ahead and play this clip and we'll break it down.
It's time for change at Mercedes.
It's time for justice in Alabama.
It's time for Mercedes workers to stand up.
Working class people have the power to change the world. That's what you're fighting for right now. Work-life balance, good health care that you can afford, a better life for your family, a better life for all of Alabama. Yeah! And the first thing you need to do to achieve that is you gotta believe you can win. Yeah. That this job can be better, that your life can be better, and that those things are worth fighting for. That's why we stand up. Faith the size of a mustard seed, as Scripture says, can move mountains. But right here in Alabama, at Mercedes, we got another mountain to move. Because deep down, I know you believe it's possible. There is a path. But you have to walk the path to victory. And hundreds of thousands of UAW members all over this country, we have your back. Are you ready to stand up? Yeah! Are you ready to fight for what you deserve? UAW! So let's walk down that path to victory together in solidarity, and let's finish this job.
It's time.
And with that, 5,200 workers in Vance, Alabama filed for a union election. If the timetable of the Volkswagen workers filing with the for a union election with the UAW in Chattanooga, Tennessee is any indicator, the election will likely take place sometime in early May. I just did some back-of-the-envelope math, out of curiosity. A number that has been thrown around a lot in the anti-union campaign is that there are 50,000 auto workers in the state of Alabama. If the UAW is successfully able to organize, when the UAW is able to successfully organize all 50,000 auto workers in the state of Alabama, that will mean a 30% increase in union density. Currently, there are 180,000 union members in the state. That would bring the number up to 230. So about 230,000. That'd be about a 30% increase. That would bring the union density percentage to 11.1%, which is higher than the national average. And I just have to say, I will be so obnoxious when Alabama has a higher union density than the entire country. I don't know if I will be able to, contain myself in public.
I think I'm going to hear you down the street yelling.
Yeah, I will just be, I will no longer be of use as a union organizer because I will be too obnoxious. I'm going to, anybody north of the Mason-Dixon line is never going to want to talk to me anymore. So it's going to be.
Every interview is going to start with a union density number.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, did you know that we're better than you? So that I will be incredibly obnoxious, but that's a small price to pay for better working conditions for Alabamians. So I think the trade-off is good. The UAW, like I said earlier, also filed charges in Germany alleging violations of German trade law by Mercedes-Benz. So apparently, one of the laws that they have in Germany for German companies is that you gotta. If you got an operation overseas, you can't be interfering with your workers' right to organize, with your workers' right to form a union. And so they are quite obviously doing that here in Alabama. They are violating American labor law, and American labor law is so much more, so much more loosey-goosey than Germany. So, workers being fired in Mercedes, being retaliated against, being disciplined for things that they would not have been disciplined for before the campaign, only because they are union leaders. So, So they have now filed charges against Mercedes in both the American system of labor law and in the German system of trade law. In the last week, the UAW president Shawn Fain attacked some of the Alabama politicians who have been attacking Alabama workers. And those Alabama politicians were not happy about that. Kay Ivey, Robert... or Gary Palmer and Mike Rogers, all of those, know-nothing freaks coming out and disparaging again the UAW. Some of the same talking points, and it's amazing. They continue. It's the funniest talking point that they continue to utilize is that the UAW is an out-of-state entity that does not want what's best for Alabamians. And it's just so funny because they are doing this in service of literal out-of-country special interests. Those are the two sides, right? If we want to play this game about, okay, where is this organization's headquarters located? Okay, yes, the UAW international headquarters is located in Detroit. But Hyundai's international headquarters is not even in this country. Even their American headquarters is not even in Alabama, right? So if you want to talk about, these two sides as that, and the degree to which they have a connection to Alabamians by virtue of geography, obviously the UAW is vastly closer. But if we go a step beyond that and take a look at the actual reality, what we have is Alabamians. Look at that video. There was a bunch of Southern drawls in that video. Alabamians against this out-of-state special interest group. There's another video that the UAW put out on Twitter that I didn't pull, but it's worth going out there and watching about the anti-union activity that Mercedes is doing. And one of the things is like this German guy with a German accent talking about how the UAW cannot help us be better. Right? And so, that's fine to be German. It's fine, right? But if we want to talk about who is an out-of-state special interest, the guy who literally his first language was not English, he's from out of Alabama. He's not from Alabama. So, but nevertheless, they're going to keep saying that because Alabama politicians said that in the 1800s and they're too lazy to update their propaganda. So there we go. That's the latest on the UAW campaign in Alabama. Really exciting. A supermajority support in the plant for the union. They're going to win, folks. They're going to win. That's my prediction. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Adam has recorded a segment about SB 231. We're going to play for you on the other side of the break. It's going to have some updates there, and we'll get to Boss Watch. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show and the labor radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host Adam Keller is out this week. Filling in for him is Ben Job. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We're going to be taking calls at the top of the second half of the show, so get those phones ready to call in. We have 40 people watching us on YouTube and still only 30 likes. Let's get those numbers up, folks. If you haven't liked the stream yet, then go ahead and do that. Subscribe to the channel, obviously, if you haven't yet. TVLR.fm/store if you want to buy any of our merch. TVLR.fm. TVLR.fm/donate if you want to make a one-time or recurring monthly contribution.
Are the new hats still up there? New hats?
New hats are still up there. Yeah, we bought 100 of them. So a limited amount, obviously, but we still have plenty. I think we sold something like 30, so we have 70 left over. So we're gonna have hats for a little while, but if you want to make sure you get one, then you gotta order one, folks. $35 plus shipping, USA Union made. You're gonna have a little bug on it too, so it's great. Looks nice. And is nice. SB 231 is a bill that we've been following very closely on the program as it deals directly with unions in the state of Alabama. Adam recorded a segment yesterday because, and you can tell he is not on the show today, but he had a couple of things that he wanted to get off of his chest regarding SB 231. So he recorded this yesterday. Let's play that, and then I'll have a couple of thoughts myself.
Hey y'all, Adam Keller here with the Valley Labor Report. Sorry I couldn't be with you live on Saturday's program, but I'm reporting here on Friday, April 5th, with some thoughts about Senate Bill 231. That's the anti-union legislation from Senator Arthur Orr out of Decatur that is moving through our Alabama State Senate. I wanted to provide an update for folks and kind of remind folks where things stand with this bill and where things are moving. You'll remember that Senate Bill 231 is the anti-union legislation that has been shopped around from state to state, passed in Georgia recently, passed previously in Tennessee. It is brought by a group called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. It's a shadowy billionaire-backed group which fights against working people. And so Senator Arthur Orr has brought this bill to Alabama on behalf of corporate sponsors. And this week there was a hearing in the state Senate committee, the Fiscal Responsibility and Economic Development Committee. You can, of course, go and find this committee hearing on the Alabama channel if you're so curious. It was Wednesday. And so we packed the committee room on Wednesday. There was a overflow of rank and file union workers, union members from a variety of unions across the state. Folks came from all over to pack the room all the way into the overflow, into the hallway. Was very proud to see the turnout. Lots of different unions, including CWA, UAW, the machinists, iron workers, AFT. It was a good crowd of folks, a good diverse crowd of everyday working people. And we were all there to let our voice be heard and to ensure that folks in the state Senate saw there was opposition to Senate Bill 231. And I'm not sure they all expected that level of opposition, frankly. That's not a committee that has a ton of controversy, is my understanding. At least it's pretty uncommon for them to walk into a public hearing and it be totally packed like that. So they gave us the opportunity to sign up to speak. They cut our side off at 16. 16 of us signed up. We could have had more. So 16 of us signed up to speak against Senate Bill 231. The other side had 2 in favor. One out-of-state lobbyist from the Mackinac Center, which is another billionaire-backed, shadowy, sketchy, slimy group. This one out of Michigan is my understanding. As well as an individual from the builders and contractors, right? So a slimy corporate out-of-state lobbyist, as well as a corporate lobbyist from some Alabama bosses. Once they realized the disparity in the speakers, the Senate committee chair and Senator Arthur Orr had a conversation. Arthur Orr placed a phone call. Shortly after that, a third individual, their name was written down as a proponent to speak. This one from the Alabama Policy Institute, yet another shadowy, sketchy, slimy, billionaire-backed outfit, which is fighting working people here in the state of Alabama. So Garland Gudger is the state senator in charge of this committee, and he announced that he would only allow 3 people to speak from each side. He said the committee was running late. They'd be there all night if we had to listen to everybody. And so he cut the speakers down to 3 for each side. He did not give our side time to caucus and actually pick who would be our 3 speakers. Now, we were strategic. We had planned speakers. We had people who signed up to speak who were in the order we wanted them to be in. But as you know, when you have a crowd of folks, you can't always control what everybody does, right? And so when it was our turn to speak, the first person who got up to the microphone was not someone who had consulted with the rest of us. And so that happens. I don't begrudge this person. I'm sure they did it with the best of intentions. But that's a friendly reminder to have movement discipline, y'all. If you're in a public hearing and the number of speakers is limited, you should probably know if you're one of the limited speakers. And if you were not, you should not take that opportunity. So that was unfortunate. It was really unfortunate, though, that Senator Gudger decided to limit the discussion and debate in that way. Senator Marika Coleman, a Democrat on the committee, did advocate for us. She made the point that people had driven from all over the state to be there. They wanted their voices heard. They were there for a public hearing. We are the public. But Senator Gudger said it was his committee and he was going to do what he wanted. So that's how it went. The corporate lobbyists, along with several legislators, spread quite a bit of misinformation, disinformation, just flat out lies about unions and about voluntary recognition and about NLRB elections and how all this works, it was very obvious to me that the legislators voting did not understand what they were voting on. Do not understand the difference between card check and ballot elections. Do not understand the process and how this works. Do not understand the realities of union organizing campaigns. Right? Senate Bill 231 would take incentives away from companies for voluntarily recognizing a union. And there are companies that do that. Right? They're going to be a little bit less likely to come to Alabama now if this bill passes. So this is interference with the private rights of businesses to make such decisions, right? If a company decides they want to recognize a union, that should be their choice, right? In fact, we should be incentivizing that choice. We should be doing the exact opposite of this bill. We should encourage companies through the use of state power to cooperate with their workforce, to collaborate with their workforce. Right? Because this reminds folks what a voluntary recognition is. What people are talking about when they say card check or voluntary recognition. They mean 50% of the employees plus at least one more have explicitly signed authorization cards with the union. And maybe they did it online, maybe they did it on paper, maybe they did it privately, maybe they did it with an organizer. However they did it, they made a private personal choice to sign an authorization card expressly authorizing that union to be their union in that workplace, right? No coercion is necessary. No coercion is necessary. And we know the reality in union organizing. The coercion comes from the companies. Nearly half of all union elections feature labor law violations from the company. Nearly 1 out of 5 campaigns feature workers that are fired for organizing. And frankly, those are probably low estimates. Right? So when Senator Arthur Orr and some of the others talk about this bill as a means to prevent coercion, they're being dishonest. Because what they're promoting is coercion. What they're promoting is union busting. They want to drag out the process. They want to delay the process. They want to make it a more costly process to the taxpayers and to everyone involved. And they want to give the employer all the more reason to conduct anti-union campaigns and to coerce and intimidate and harass and fire employees. That's the message Senator Orr is sending to companies. That's what he wants them to do, clearly. So it's an attack on businesses and their rights. It's an attack on workers because, well, this is one of our federally, legally recognized paths to get a union, to win a union. And this seeks to take it away. Well, why do people join unions? Oh, yeah, just remember that union members, on average, make better pay, have better benefits, and have better working conditions. Right? So the lives of Alabama's constituents, by and large, are better with unionization. And that is what Senator Orr is standing against. Standing against his own constituents, organizing to make their lives and the lives of their family members better. So this big government overreach is likely illegal in that it preempts federal law and it takes away a right that is legally recognized. Whether it is or not, I can't say for certain. I'm not a lawyer. What I can say for certain is this will go to court. And Alabama's taxpayers will pay more money defending its legislation in the courts. So be prepared for that. So I was really disgusted at the way the hearing unfolded, the way there was so much misinformation being uttered, by the lack of respect for so many people, working people who traveled to Montgomery to have their voice heard. The committee passed the bill 11-3 on straight party lines. Senator Sam Cavan did express some concerns about the bill as being an interference with the rights of businesses, but he did give it a favorable report. He seemed uncommitted for the the floor vote, so we'll see. We'll see how other Republican officials feel about this. One thing worth noting is that they amended the bill in committee to apply to local governments as well. And I've already heard that there are some local officials who are not too happy about that. County commissioners, city councilors, mayors, folks who may not even be very pro-union, frankly, but don't want to see their authority taken away by the state. They don't want to see their authority to develop their economy interfered with by the state legislature. So there's plenty of reasons to be opposed to Senate Bill 231. There's plenty of reasons to be upset at the way this is traveling through the legislature already. It is expected to be on the floor of the Senate on Tuesday, April 9th. I really encourage folks, if you can be in Montgomery at the State House that afternoon, Tuesday the 9th, you should be there. But if you can't make it to Montgomery, and many of us can't, please make some phone calls. Make some phone calls to your senator, and then make some phone calls to your members, your friends, your colleagues. Get other people to make these phone calls to their senators. We need overwhelming pressure. They need to feel the heat. Whether this passes or not, they need to know that Alabama's working class, Alabama's labor movement, that we won't go down without a fight. So they need to feel the pressure. We need people to be there Tuesday during the vote. We need people calling and emailing and visiting their senators in the days between. If we lose this fight on the Senate floor, we got to take it to the House. Try to beat it in House committee. Try to beat it on the floor of the House. We are running out of time for the legislative session. I believe there's only 11 days left, right? So we're running out of time, so we have to slow this down as much as we possibly can to run out the clock and beat this bad legislation. It's my hope that there are senators on Tuesday who will represent working people, who will represent their true constituents, represent the best interests of this state, and who will do all they can to ask questions, to speak the truth, to dispel the misinformation, to share real facts about unions and card check and voluntary recognition and about this law and the real consequences of this law. So that's my hope. I really appreciate all the folks who have been fighting this good fight so far. It's going to take more and more of us getting involved, getting engaged. It's going to take the entire Alabama labor movement getting involved to try to fight this legislation and send a message to our legislators in Montgomery that we're not going down without a fight. So that's all I have, y'all. Stay engaged. Call your senator. Stay tuned. We have to defeat Senate Bill 231. Solidarity, y'all.
All right, we're going to wrap up with Boss Watch. We do this every week, take a look at what bosses we're up to in the South, and we're going to start this week in Missouri, where federal workplace safety investigators found a Missouri roofing contractor again risking the safety of its employees by failing to protect them against the construction industry's deadliest hazard, falls from heights, at 5 residential work sites in Wentzville in October and November 2023. Inspectors with the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration opened investigations after observing H.R. Vasquez Construction, LLC employees on roofs without required fall protection equipment at separate sites on October 25th, 27th, 30th, November 2nd, and November 28th, 2023. Specifically, OSHA found the St. Louis company did not provide employees employees with fall protection as they worked at heights greater than 6 feet and failed to ensure workers using pneumatic nail guns wore personal eye and face protective equipment. H.R. Vasquez Construction also allowed the improper use of ladders, had not developed a written hazard communication plan, and did not begin or maintain an accident prevention program. In all, OSHA cited the company for 13 violations, 9 repeat, 3 serious, and 1 other than serious, and assessed $267,000 in proposed penalties. Since 2021, the agency has cited the contractor 7 times for putting roofing workers in danger. The agency first identified 3 serious violations related to a lack of required fall protection by H.R. Vasquez Construction in October 2021 at a Baldwin worksite. Another inspection in Chesterfield in June 2022 led OSHA to cite the company for 2 repeat violations. In 2022, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported over 1,000 construction workers died on the job. Of those deaths, nearly 400 were related to falls from elevation. As part of a continuing effort to prevent fall-related fatalities in construction, the agency, industry, and safety groups and other worker advocates are encouraging construction employers and workers to join the 11th Annual National Safety Stand-Down to prevent falls in construction, May 6 to 10, 2024. Several partners there. The agency is inviting employers and workers to learn how to conduct a safety stand-down and view a video on fall safety that includes a message from a former construction worker and fall survivor. In Oklahoma, while mortuary workers are called on to provide afterlife care for the deceased and compassion for the bereaved, a federal investigation has found the operators of an Oklahoma City mortuary were less than caring when it came to paying dozens of workers overtime wages they rightfully earned. A U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division investigation has recovered $231,000 in back wages and an equal amount in damages for 66 employees of Stillwell Limited Incorporated. After learning the employer paid them straight time rates for all hours worked instead of paying one time and a half their regular rate of pay for hours over 40 in a work week. A review of company records showed many of the affected workers earned low wages and often worked more than 50 hours in a week. The division determined the employer paid employees on a semi-monthly basis and failed to keep accurate records as required by federal law. In Georgia, RSPS Holdings and SRS Milledgeville, franchisors of the popular fast casual barbecue restaurant Shane's Rib Shack, have agreed to pay $56,000 and provide other relief to settle a lawsuit for sexual harassment and retaliation filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. According to the EEOC's lawsuit, the companies violated federal law when they subjected a teenage female employee at its Milledgeville, Georgia location to a hostile work environment based on her sex, then fired her in retaliation for complaining. The employee, who was a college freshman at the time, was sexually harassed by an older male manager from September to December 2021. During that time, the manager made daily unwanted comments about the female employee's physical appearance and his romantic feelings for her, spread false sexual rumors about her, and cornered her in areas of the restaurant without cameras, demanding a hug or attention from her before allowing her to pass by. According to the suit, the female employee complained about the harassment to her supervisor on multiple occasions, but the supervisor, too, made no effective remedial action. Instead, the restaurant terminated her shortly after her last complaint and provided no plausible explanation for doing so. Such alleged conduct violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits sexual harassment and retaliation against those who complain about it. The EEOC filed suit in U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Georgia, Macon Division, after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. The federal court approved the 2-year consent decree resolving the EEOC's lawsuit. In the decree, In addition to providing monetary relief to the victim, the companies have agreed to revise and distribute their anti-harassment and anti-retaliation policies, post a notice in the workplace informing employees of the settlement, and provide specialized training to all supervisors, managers, and employees. Furthermore, the companies have agreed to provide the EEOC with periodic reports regarding any future employee complaints of sexual harassment or retaliation, including a description of each employee's allegations and the company's response. We have a few dishonorable mentions, but we're not going to have time to get to it today. You're going to have to tune into the second half of the show to hear more. We're going to be on Facebook and YouTube for another hour and a half. If you're listening to us on WMMT, you can just make sure that your dial stays tuned to WMMT and hear the rest of the show here in a couple of days. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857 if you want to call in and comment on any part of the show or ask us any question. Happy to answer that. The website is TVLR.fm. If you'd like to make a donation, that is TVLR.fm/donate. Or if you'd like to buy our merch, TVLR.fm/store is where you will do that. Appreciate everybody's time today. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the first half of the show. Got a great overtime lined up. We're going to be talking to a railroad worker about the contract negotiations that are coming up and some of the RWU's priorities. Also going to be playing a clip from a YouTuber and bringing you some more details about Daimler's negotiation in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. See you next week. All right. Off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. Like the stream if you haven't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And like I said, got a great overtime lined up for you. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Folks, welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Folks, if you are listening to us as a podcast, then give us a 5-star rating. It's super quick to do, and they say it helps us. I don't know. But a fun fact about that, I just want to say I appreciate everybody who has given us a 5-star rating, because we have, of Alabama news podcasts, not even just Alabama Union podcasts, because we're the only one, but of Alabama news podcasts, we are like one of the most highly ranked on any of the podcasting services, Apple, Spotify. We have more 5-star rankings than most other Alabama news podcasts. So even though that is still a small pool, we are right up there with, people who like get paid to do this by, millionaire corporations.
By the dark money.
By the dark money, right? Yeah. So we do this in our spare time, and we're right there with them as far as how many people listen to us. So, that's not bad.
I'll take it.
That's not bad.
Take it.
Yeah, for sure. I'll take it. There's this fellow on Twitter who is, who's like every now and then he'll reply to our stuff, and he, saying some silly things about unions, and I always tell him to call in, but now he's saying no thanks. And I told him to call in again, and I gave him the phone number. He says no thanks. I'll get ganged up on, buddy. There's 2 people, and I can just tell Ben not to say anything, so it'll just be me. But, and look at me. I'm a soy boy communist, as you might say. So I don't know why you're so scared. Beta male.
Not very alpha.
Not alpha. Not alpha at all. But, he's making this case that, unionization creates artificially high wages. And see, that's just such a funny thing, because who decides what's artificial? And as if the wages that are paid in non-union environments, are you telling me that the boss discovers that in nature? Like he opens the store, right? And then just automatically, but naturally, in nature, he walks in and he sees this from nature telling him how much he should be paying somebody. That's presumably what's being presented here by this libertarian NAL on Twitter, is that, non-union wages are just natural. They're set by nature. So that's an interesting theory. That's an interesting theory that the business owners are just able to discover the prices in nature, prices for wages. But I'm not convinced personally. I'm not convinced that that's actually how it happens. But David is too much of a scaredy pants to call in and debate me. So there you go. We're gonna have to do without that. I'm sure it would be very enlightening, but he's going to deprive you of that. I'm going to get to the rest of these dishonorable mentions from Boss Watch, because some of them, it's not going to take long, and it's worth seeing some of this stuff. In Austin, Texas, a subsidiary of Cavco Industries, which is one of the nation's largest producers of module and manufactured homes, faces $272,000 in penalties after federal investigators found the company exposing employees to more than 24 serious safety violations during an October 2023 inspection. Since 2015, OSHA has cited the same company with 38 workplace safety and health violations at manufacturing facilities in 4 states. U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division investigators found the Lexington, Kentucky pub and restaurant, Crafty Draft Brew Pub, illegally distributed tips and failed to pay a cash wage of at least $2.13 an hour. Can you imagine that?
They skipped on the $2.13?
Seriously.
Come on. That's brutal, dude.
You only have to pay $2 an hour, and you can't even do that.
They could have looked in the sofa.
That's
and they could have digged those out of
the
car or something.
How greedy do you have to be? They failed to pay a cash wage of at least $2.13 per hour directly to tipped employees. The U.S. Department of Labor discovered, and look, and it's amazing this is how much these people work, right? This is how much the servers who make $2 an hour work. Listen to how much the Department of Labor recovered for 23 workers. $125,000 coming from stealing $2 an hour. That's crazy. That's bonkers. U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division investigators found Williams Plumbing and Associates paid employees a time-and-a-half rate for only the first 5 hours after 40 in a work week. After that, the employer reverted to paying their employees their regular rate of pay for all hours after 45. That's an interesting strategy. Didn't work out this time. The Department of Labor recovered $25,000 in stolen wages and liquidated damages for 17 workers. Drug and medical testing supply company American Screening, LLC, has agreed to pay $50,000 and provide other relief to settle a race discrimination lawsuit filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which alleged that the company fired a black employee for wearing her hair natural and replaced her with a white employee. So there you go. Folks, bosses are doing this all the time. And getting away with it. This is just the stuff that you're able to, this is just the stuff that the government enforcers are able to find. So not good, not good. But I appreciate everybody tuning in. We got a lot of folks in the chat. We got Lee, Brandon, D.L. Cindero, Bill, Dylan, Theodore, Earth System, and Jose, Adam, and Notary. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and participating in the chat. Don't forget, the phone line is still open, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. If you would like to call in, comment on any of the stories that we're talking about today, or ask us a question. We have, yes, Leanne, did I not say? I thought, maybe I accidentally just said Lee, but yes, Leanne. So...
all of our peoples.
All of our peoples. Love everybody. We love everybody. Have we got Mark in the Zoom yet?
Not yet.
Not
Let
yet.
me double check again, but no.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I told him 11:15, but running a little awkwardly because now I don't have a full 10 minutes for the PRO Act. I'll just have to bring Mark on later. But I wanted to bring you this clip from Mike Rowe. Everybody knows Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs. And there's also a lot that most people don't know about Mike Rowe. So let's play this clips, and I'll have to maybe ruin some of your childhoods.
It's the cookie cutter advice that's killing us. The idea that the best way to work involves an employer, a 40-hour work week, a union, perhaps. And I always love the freelancing option.
This is not happening in the third world. This is happening right here.
These people need to understand that the rug is about to be yanked out from under them.
More than 70 million Americans work as independent contractors. If the PRO Act becomes federal law, everything you love about independent status ceases to exist. There are real people who are impacted by this.
My wife got a really bad case of bronchitis. If I'm an employee driver and I decide I'm going to stay home for a week and take care of my wife, my employer's going to say, Tom, I can't leave that truck sitting still for a week. They'll probably fire me. As an independent contractor, I can just tell dispatch, I'm going to be gone for a week. I'll let you know when I'm ready to go again.
That's the flexibility we talked about before. It vanishes in every state if it gets caught up in the slipstream of the PRO Act.
So there you go. That is Mike Rowe cutting ads against the PRO Act, which is just kind of super bizarre. This is how you know that the corporate millionaires and billionaires just have more money to throw around than they know what to do with, because the PRO Act has exactly zero chance of passing anytime soon because of the Republican House. And so, nobody's even talking about the PRO Act right now. And so that's how you know that, these people have just way more money than they know what to do with, because they're out here cutting ads against a piece of legislation that has exactly 0% chance of passing. But just as a reminder, what does the PRO Act do? The PRO Act does a lot of stuff. It is really kind of the cornucopia of labor legislation that unions support. But generally, what it would do is try to, kind of rebalance the balance of power as workers who are trying to unionize, because we talk constantly about how under the current system of labor law, the employers are constantly interfering illegally, utilizing illegal intimidation, coercive, and retaliatory tactics against their workers to convince them not to unionize, instead of just having a debate in the battle of ideas. They're not doing that. They're using intimidation, coercion, and retaliation. And so the PRO Act seeks to fix a lot of that. One of the things is that employers will no longer be able to set union election procedures, which is just bizarre that employers have any say in union election procedures at all, because unions are fundamentally, organizations of workers. And so under the PRO Act, the only people who would be involved in setting up union election procedures would be the workers in the NLRB. The PRO Act would also prohibit employers from forcing workers to attend captive audience meetings, which just makes sense, because my company should not be allowed to force me to listen to their anti-union propaganda, just as the union cannot force me to listen to their pro-union propaganda. The PRO Act will also require the NLRB to go to court and get an injunction to immediately reinstate workers if the employer has illegally retaliated against workers for union activity, because that constantly happens. Employees are constantly fired during union campaigns, and but it takes, and a lot of times they will win the case, but they will win the case after the employer has already defeated the union campaign. Everybody else has already moved on. Everybody else has been fired as well. And so the campaign just doesn't have any more legs. So that's what happens typically. And this would try to expedite that process under the PRO Act. The PRO Act would also employers who commit violations under the National Labor Relations Act would face civil penalties, and corporate officials can be held personally liable for violation of the law. Right now, it's only a slap on the wrist. The PRO Act would give workers the right to file a civil action against their employer. Collective and class action waivers are banned under the PRO Act. The PRO Act makes employee misclassification a violation under the NLRA and requires employers to follow an ABC test for employee classification, because we see a lot of employee misclassification, classifying employees as independent contractors so that you can get away with not providing them with benefits and rights that you would normally have to. And we just talked about this with the WWE, for example. The WWE wrestlers are independent contractors despite them literally not being allowed to work for anybody else or themselves. Very independent. But, they're allowed, the WWE is allowed to get away with that for now. The PRO Act would also codify a joint employer standard. It would illegalize right-to-work laws and require employers to follow a process for reaching a first agreement when workers organize. And it would prohibit employers from permanently replacing striking workers. It would ban the use of offensive lockouts, and remove prohibitions on secondary activities. So as you can see, it does a lot of stuff, but it's very broad, but it is all good for working people, and that is why Mike Rowe doesn't like it. And here's where I'm gonna, destroy your childhood, unfortunately. Because Mike Rowe, if you know him as just the guy who likes workers who do dirty jobs, then, you might be surprised that he would be opposed to pro-union legislation, to pro-worker legislation. But what he actually is a big oil millionaire and billionaire funded propagandist. He is funded by people like the Koch brothers. He is funded by chambers of commerce, and contrary to what some people think, the Chamber of Commerce is not a department or division of the government. It is an organization of employers. It is a council of bosses. He's funded by chambers of commerce. He's also funded by Shell, the oil company. And so what he tries to do is romanticize the American worker doing dirty jobs in unsafe working conditions, as such. He does not talk about the way that people have been able to fight back against unsafe working conditions. He's always been, in opposition to unions, and here he's in opposition to unions again. And so, this is just who Mike Rowe is. He is not a pro-worker guy. He is a pro-boss guy. Very unfortunate.
But Jacob, he rolls up his sleeves. They're
Right.
always rolled up.
Yes, he is he cosplays as a worker. That's what Mike Rowe does.
$1 million.
Yeah, so.
And we do have Mark on the line here, just so you're
Fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and bring him in. Mark Burrows I'm not sure if he currently or if he's retired, but he for sure worked for the railroads. He was a member of his union and served his union in various capacities. He's been a member of Railroad Workers United for 14 years, and Railroad Workers United is a cross-craft caucus of railroad workers who are carrying out a struggle within the craft unions for unity, solidarity, and democracy, carrying on a tradition of rank-and-file activity which dates back to the 1890s in the time of Eugene Debs. So we're fans of Eugene Debs here. We're fans of rail workers, and certainly they could use a lot more coordination. That's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. But Mark, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Glad to be here. Honored to be here. Appreciate the work you guys do. And
Yes.
for clarity, yes, I have been retired for a few years, liberated from slave wage labor.
There you go. Well, glad to hear it. Congratulations. I only have 30 more years to go. So I am maybe, is it bad that I'm already counting down the years that I've already got?
I wouldn't at that point. I wouldn't start marking them yet.
Yeah,
Wait a little
it
bit.
was 31 years.
Right.
It was 31 years last year, but this year it's 30. I can retire when I'm 57. So thanks to my union. So, but
All right,
anyway,
there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So congratulations on your retirement, Mark. Glad to hear it. I guess let's start we'll start with some background, because we're now talking about rail negotiations again. And for people who are not, who maybe weren't following the rail negotiations super closely in 21 and 22, or have maybe forgotten, maybe they knew it and they forgot, this seems like a pretty quick turnaround, right? The union contracts are typically longer than 2 years. So how is it that you're already gearing up to negotiate a new contract? What's up with that?
So the short version is the Railway Labor Act. So which provides all these mechanisms and hoops and cooling off periods and everything. So by the time Biden and Congress rammed that contract down our throats back at the end of a few years ago, the contract had already been expired for 3 years. So once it went into effect, it had 2 years of shelf life, and so that's why we're right back. The process is the unions and the carriers will submit what's called Section 6 notices, which is their ultimate wish list, and that begins to play out in November. And then from there, they'll go back and forth, and if they don't come to an agreement, various 30, 60, 90-day cooling off periods, blah, 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 blah. And then still, if there's no agreement, then you could end up with the same scenario that played out last round.
Wow. So just to reiterate for folks, this was a 5-year contract that you finally finished. Well, you didn't finish negotiating. You had it rammed down your throats by Biden and Congress 3 years after it was supposed to have taken effect. 3 years after your contract expired the first time.
Yes.
That is Looney Tunes. And so you had 3 years of like backdating. Did you at least get a nice check from the back wages from the raises or not? I'm having trouble remembering that.
That there was some retroactive pay. There years ago that was kind of like you could count on that. Workers could count on that. But now they kind of they move up the implementation date and reduce the retroactive pay and fill in that blank with a signing bonus type thing. But yes, there was a reasonable amount of retroactive pay for the workers who went 3 years without an agreement.
Yeah, that's insane. So remind us then, okay, so just the process of negotiation is wild under the Railway Labor Act. And people, I constantly find, even union folks who are not hip to the way that labor law is divvied up in this country. We've got private sector workers, except for rail and airline workers who, private sector workers, except for those folks under the National Labor Relations Act. You've got rail and airline workers under the Railway Labor Act. You've got federal employees under the Federal Labor Relations Act. And then you've got just a hodgepodge of labor laws for state and municipal workers across the country, because each state and municipality is allowed to set their own labor laws. So it's just a bizarre kind of situation here that we have. But at some point in the conversation, I want to see if y'all have any plans to try to make it so that you do not spend 3 years after contract expiration negotiating another contract. I'm interested in that. But before we go there, can you just remind us of the issues that were at play during this, 3 years that you're negotiating this contract after your previous contract had expired? What were some of the hot button topics at the bargaining table and on the in the trains, as it were?
So I'm going to answer that in two parts. One, the hot button issues at the bargaining table, and then the issues that, in my and Railroad Workers United opinion, were not being discussed. But the main issues at the bargaining table were quality of life issues, scheduling, no paid sick days, the draconian attendance policies, where many workers were working on extra boards, 24 hours. I'm being on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, going to work on 2 hours notice, no scheduled days off. The only days off you'd get were per the FRA mandate. If you worked 6 days straight, you could get 1 day off, and 7 days straight got you 2 days off. And then of course the carriers abused that. People were getting fired for just trying to take off for things like, their daughter's wedding or the kids' baseball game or whatever. And we had an incident on the Burlington Northern where a guy actually died of a heart attack while running the train because he was afraid to lay off and go to the doctor for fear of getting disciplined. Those were the main hot button issues that the union was negotiating. How that was resolved, for the most part, we got a few we got a few paid sick days. We got there was some ridiculous clause where you could have a few days allowed to see a doctor, but you had to give them like a month's notice, and it could only be Tuesday through Thursday. And then the scheduling agreements were left to be negotiated on property, carrier by carrier, and so there've been a range of agreements now with the major class ones. Different, for instance, one agreement is like you work 11 days, you schedule for 11 days, then you get 4 days off, stuff like that. So those were the hot button issues. I would say, I think it's fair to say, the worst of those, the roughest edges have been taken off. Rail workers have a little bit more quality of life. Still, working 11 days on an extra board, working 11 days straight is still going to lead to fatigue and exhaustion, and which is a safety issue. But there has been an improvement. So so that's how that's been resolved. For my take, safety issues were not part of the discussion, and there's no indication that they will be, such as train lanes. We're running 2-3 mile long trains, which is a major safety issue. And now the FRA has just come out with this 2-person crew mandate, which there's a lot more under the surface. We had always thought that might really come to bear in this next round of negotiations. So that's kind of on hold as this thing gets resolved. So that's kind of where things are at right now.
And so I think, kind of as you alluded to, there were some of the roughest edges were sanded down in the contract itself, and then some more were rounded down as Biden the Biden administration was able to implement some rules and things like this. And another one of those rules that have come down from the Biden administration's Federal Railroad Administration is a new a minimum 2-person crew rule. I think that certainly it's better than not having the rule, but I do think that my understanding is that there are some asterisks there. Could you explain the rule for us, and what are the asterisks?
Okay, there are some big asterisks, major asterisks. It's about, I think, something like 280 pages or something like that. I have not personally gone through it all. But if it's anything, and we're working on it, we're working on formulating, going through it and formulating a response. But if it's anything like anything close to what they had a tentative 2-person crew thing that had been out for public discussion for a few years. If it's anything like that, there are big loopholes, big enough to drive a train through. And at the surface level, it says 2-person crew. Then many of the asterisks, it charts a path for how the carriers can get exemptions. What one concern is that so this is kind of like for Class 1 railroads. Your major ones like your BN and CSX, the main six Class 1 railroads. There's a range of Class 2 and Class 3 railroads referred to as short lines, which have basically been spun off. The major railroads sold them off because they weren't making the rate of profit that they wanted to. So they're regional throughout the country, and most of them are owned by big major consortiums, but they get a lot more latitude. They're out of sight, out of mind. They fly under the radar, and some of those are operating engineer only as we speak. And so one of the concerns is that what the carriers could do is do this process of selling off more of their main line, turning it into short lines, which then Class 2 and Class 3 railroads have a lower bar of regulations. There's plenty of asterisks to be concerned about. We are not popping the champagne bottles at this point in time, and we're basically working on formulating our response to highlight those asterisks.
Right. I think that makes sense, and it's important to be sober-minded about these things. So then, that brings us to these negotiations. Talk to us about, when do they start, and have the rail unions begun, member surveys to determine contract negotiation priorities, or anything like that, or have they come down, the leadership come down with priorities that they're sharing with you at this time? Just talk to us about where are we with the state of the upcoming negotiations?
So like I said, it really begins in November, when the carriers, like I said, it's called a Section 6 notice, and that will get officially submitted, and that will be on their website. We'll have access to it, and then the unions put their Section 6 notice, and like I said, it's kind of like the ultimate, their dream wish list for both parties, and then they go from there. One of the problems is, if you go back to how the UAW negotiated their agreement, think about the transparency. Not only did auto workers know what was being discussed, what was being proposed, what was being counter proposed, but we all knew it. If we were paying attention, we knew how those discussions and negotiations were going on, which is a major. It's a major testament, a conquest of the United Auto Workers for Democracy, who have been able to assert their strength and power within that union. So compared to that, there's like 180-degree lack of transparency from the railroad union leaders, so even after we get the Section 6 notices, after that, rail workers for the most part are pretty much kept in the dark until boom, here's a tentative agreement. We suggest that you ratify it because we don't want a third party, i.e. the government, stepping in, which could make it worse. I'm sure once the Section 6 notices go out, there will be surveys, for input, how meaningful that is, as opposed to how much it is for optics. The proof will be in the final end result. But I hope that answers that question for now.
Yes, I think so. Well, so what are the, so we're a little ways away, it seems like, from the railroad unions kind of soliciting feedback for contract priorities, or, delivering them themselves. And it sounds like, even to the extent that they are going to be collecting member opinions for that, it's not going to be as transparent as, like you mentioned, that we saw with the UAW. So what priorities is Railroad Workers United tracking that members would like to see addressed in this round of negotiations?
I would say I'm sure railroad workers want to get more. Like I said, they've been able to put a dent in as you referred to, sanding off the roughest edges, and so I think it's fair to say that that we'd like to see more, to go deeper into a quality of life conquest. As far as Railroad Workers United, we would like to see safety issues, such as these ridiculously long trains, and we would like to see the two-person crew. We would like to see ironclad contractual agreements with no asterisks, with no exceptions, because even this FRA mandate, to whatever extent it may be, some improvement on a certain level, that's only as good as the next administration. We've seen this time and time again. So it looks good right now. The established union leaders have been popping the champagne bottles, and figuratively speaking, I can't say that for a fact, literally, but in their tone and the statements they've put out, it certainly conveys this tone, big celebrating victory for workers. And it's very shallow and surface level, because until it's in contractual black and white, it could be undone by the next it could be rewritten, undone by the next administration, and we've seen this happen before.
Well, and even without it being totally rewritten, my understanding is one of the asterisks in the rule is that there exists the ability for the railroad carriers to request a waiver from the two-person rule. So you could imagine even a Trump administration that doesn't totally scrap the rule, they're just, really willy-nilly with waivers. So yeah, you definitely want something that's more lasting and concrete than, an executive change from an administration, because as you've seen and as we've seen in not only the Federal Railroad Administration, but in the NLRB, in the FTC, in the CFPB, any federal agency, though that, you're going to see pretty radical changes with each administration, and so you don't want to be dependent on that for things as important as safety. What about quality of life issues? I know that those were, those were some of the roughest edges from the last negotiations. Is there, a lot of interest in progressing further on those, getting more time off, things like that?
Yeah, and let me just back up to the waiver thing before I answer this. It's worth pointing out that the Lac Magentic tragedy back in 2013, when the runaway oil train exploded, killing 47 people, leveling the town of Lac Magentic in Quebec, Transport Canada, kind of the equivalent of the Federal Railroad Administration. So the Montreal, Maine and Atlantic was one of these, a short line. It had been spun off from what had once been the Canadian Pacific, and so they were able to request a waiver, and they were running engineer only, and the fact that train was engineer only was a major contributing factor to that tragedy. So I just wanted to say that on how waivers can work and how they can have an impact. So yes, your point is absolutely right. What they could do with that. So yeah, I would say rails want more quality of life, want better scheduling, more regular scheduled days off, more paid days off, more regular scheduling, a lot less of this this extra board 24-hour on call, having more of an idea of when they're going to work and stuff like that. So it's fair to say that they will be trying to extend their gains, the gains that were made, and extend those and make them more meaningful, justifiable pay for the work, and how how rail workers have to live and exist. And like I said, unfortunately, major safety issues will probably not be a big part of these negotiations. They should be, and they should have been in the last round. And so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of union leaders that it seems to me, and even and union members, particularly in the trades, and I couldn't say exactly kind of what the cultural overlap is between the railroad unions and the building trade unions is, but there really does seem to be a culture among those group of unions of almost being proud of your exploitation and not wanting to go after, quality of life types of issues. They will talk about, how much they make, and they'll talk about, that they have health insurance, 100% employer paid and all of this, and they'll be happy about it. Earn while you learn with the apprenticeships, and they'll talk about all of that. But, you talk about their schedule and how much they work, and they turn into and just to be frank about it, they turn into, like the boss. Oh yeah, I work all the time, and we don't want people that aren't willing to work, right? Yeah, it's kind of bizarre to me, as somebody who cares about my free time. I don't want to work all the time. Is that a kind of a similar situation where, among the rail unions, is there that similar kind of attitude of being proud of how much you work and how hard it is, and then kind of almost talking yourself out of wanting more time off?
I would say years ago. I mean, I hired out back in 1974, and that's when I started. And the older heads, they wanted that overtime. So they would be proud if they were making big money. They would be working 12-hour jobs and proud of it. And the generation today does not want to work like that, does not want to live like that. And what we're seeing is a tremendous turnover. It used to be people would get on the railroad and see it as a career, get your 30 years in. Of course, you can't get a full pension until you need 30 and 60. It used to be 65, but so people would start and see it as a lifelong career. And now younger people just kind of see it as a stopping point, almost like going to working on an oil field for a few years, or working on working in Alaska for a few years, kind of like, okay, here, I'll sacrifice my life and family and everything for a few years, make a few bucks, and then get out and do something. And so there's been a tremendous turnover to the point where some railroads are offering bonus. They've always been, for the last several years, they offer signing bonuses to recruit people, and they get money from the government to hire veterans. They get a bonus there, but now they're actually offering workers, like one of my former coworkers. They get offered thousands of dollars if you can bring somebody in, and they don't want to do it. They don't want to bring their family or friends in, and then you get an older the layer of workers that have been there 15, like this friend of mine puts it, they feel trapped. They can't get out. They've got too much time invested, and so they've got to keep slogging on. So people with 10 to 20 years, they feel trapped, and many younger workers just see it as, I don't need this. I'll go find something else to do. So that would be my answer to that.
So the reason that I wanted to have y'all on is I saw a month, maybe 2 months ago, the RWU begin their calls for coordinated bargaining. And just to reiterate for folks who don't know, there are over a dozen railroad unions, and so you can imagine that there exists the ability and the attempt oftentimes by the rail carriers to try to whipsaw these different unions against each other to try to get the best deal for the company and try to worsen the deals for the workers. And so RWU, Railroad Workers United, the Inter-Union Cross-Craft Caucus of rail workers, they have called for coordinated bargaining. Talk to us about the extent to which rail unions have engaged in coordinated bargaining, what RWU would like to see ideally in these negotiations as far as coordinated bargaining goes, and what moves have we seen in that direction from the unions?
So a brief little history from our founding, from RWU's founding in 2008, this is one of our founding platforms of a united bargaining coalition, and this goes back to Deb's attempts with the American Railway Union, trying to organize all the railroad workers into one union, and at one time, the majority of railroad workers actually were in the American Railway Union before it was crushed in the aftermath of the Pullman strike. So that's a history lesson for another day. And so we are trying to continue, follow up on that legacy. And over the years, it's always been, once one union settles, then boom, that's it, that sets the precedent, and you can fight it. And if it goes to arbitration or PEB, then the precedent is already set. And especially with the operating crafts, if the engineers or conductors agree to anything involving working agreements, then boom, it becomes pretty much a rubber stamp. Over the last few rounds of negotiations, you started to get 2 to 3 several unions would be in this coalition, and several unions would be in this coalition, and then so you had maybe 2 or 3 coalitions, and it finally culminated with this last round of negotiations, where for the first time we actually had a quote united bargaining coalition, and it functioned that way up until the Presidential Emergency Board recommendations came out. And then boom, right off the bat, a couple of the unions started putting out tentative agreements based on the PEB recommendations. So for all intents and purposes, that was a united bargaining coalition on paper only, and ultimately they resorted to the same methods and divisive tactics that had been happening. So us calling for a united bargaining coalition on a certain point is nothing new, but we are using what happened the last time to make it clear that a united bargaining coalition is not worth that term, the paper that it's written on, without an ironclad agreement, an understanding that says nobody settles until we all settle. Without that understanding and concept, it's a united you can call it a united bargaining coalition, but if you don't have that ironclad, so I think that's the difference in what we're calling for now is so we already did the united bargaining coalition. We need a united bargaining coalition that is a real united bargaining coalition at how it acts and functions, and with the fundamental principle that nobody settles until everybody settles. Only then can it really be a united bargaining coalition.
I think that it doesn't make sense to call it a bargaining coalition unless you have that, because that's kind of the whole thing, like you said. Have the unions been moving in that direction? Have they made any noises that would make you think that 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 they will be doing that in this round?
We have there's no indicator. Again, with that whole lack of transparency, there really hasn't been a lot of motion and a lot said, and we have no indication to. We don't feel comfortable that without massive pressure from the rank and file, putting that demand forward. With major pressure within everyone's respective unions, at this point in time, we have no reason to believe that things would be different than the last time. That's why we're getting out in front and drawing the lessons of what happened last time and appealing to the rank and file workers to put pressure on their respective unions to that how it played out last time, that ain't going to fly. That was just a fake and a fraud. And we need a real united bargaining coalition that actually functions like one.
Mark Burrows, a member of Railroad Workers United for over 12 years, served as co-chair and organizer of the caucus in the past, and the current editor of RWU's quarterly newsletter, The Highball. Mark, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
And if I could just add, go to our website, railroadworkersunited.org, and get more information about our call for public ownership, and we've launched a new website, Public Rail Now, and also been following the situation in East Palestine, where the residents are calling for pressure on the government to pass the Stafford Act to guarantee health care for people who are screwed over there. And for the best coverage, I'm sure you're covering it, and the Real News Network has been covering it, and so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. Talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. There you go, folks. Railroad Workers United. Find them online. And if you're a rail worker, yeah, absolutely. Tell your leadership you need coordinated bargaining, and you need real coordinated bargaining, not this flim-flam, willy-nilly, we're going to call it whatever we want, but no action behind it. One of the reasons that we do the show is to try to educate folks about unions and unionism, and the benefit that unions have, not just for their members but for society. Like, that's explicitly why I wanted to be so involved in unions. That's why I, wanted to become a steward in my union. That's why I wanted to serve on the labor council in the area. And really why I do what I do, because I do not believe that unions only serve their members. I do not believe that is their function in society. I think that is a narrow view of unions and unionism that some people do hold, to be fair. Some people that are in unions and that are, outside of unions, they do hold that position. I do not hold that position. I do not think that definition of unions matches with their historical position in societies across the globe. But there are people that disagree with me, and here's one of them. Let's play this clip from Destiny on the place of unions in society.
You need to understand what things are designed to do based on who they work for and who's paying them, okay? Kind of the same thing, okay? So, for instance, when I talk about unions, okay? Unions do not exist to make America a better place. Unions don't exist to make people happier. They don't exist to help our country. Unions exist to represent employees. That's it. They represent the people that they represent. That's all, okay? Whatever group of employees. So in some cases it might be really good, in some cases it might be really bad, but that's what they do. That's all they do.
Yeah, so, that's his thinking. And like I said, there are some people inside of unions that do have that belief about what unionism is and kind of the driving force of unionism. And there's certainly something to be said about the importance of understanding incentives and the material positions in society of organizations, right? So you can understand why, let's say, a manufacturing union would oppose automation, even if as a whole, automation might be maybe better for society. Or you could understand why some unions would oppose, a coal miners union might oppose a transition to non-fossil fuel related energy, even though the mine workers in this country and in very many other countries actually do support a transition to cleaner energy. But you could understand why, based on their incentives, based on the members that they have. But it's also important to actually kind of be historically informed and take a look at the role that unions and unionism has played in society. And you are not able to account for the actions of unions and their impact on society by taking this narrow view of unions. You cannot account for the impact that unions have played in society by saying they only represent their members, nothing more, nothing less, in a very narrow sense. You just can't account for that, right? You can't account for the historical position of unions. Because what we have seen actually in particularly in upsurges of labor movements in the United States and elsewhere is that unions do not, in fact, only represent and only fight for their members. And I mentioned the mine workers a while ago, and I'll refer to them again because in the in the upsurge in the United States and again all over the world, in the upsurge in the United States, the mine workers played something of a vanguard role in the organization of other U.S. industries. In fact, the organization of the steel industry would not have been possible but for the investment of the UMW in the organization of the steel industry. And same with many other unions. The textile industry was, the textile unionization was supported by the mine workers, and this happens, like I said, globally. We see mine workers not actually being conservative. We see mine workers actually being quite radical, kind of contrary to what how we imagine coal miners today. We see coal miners being extremely radical in their organization and in the things that they fight for. Now, you can say, if you wanted to, take this position and try to backpedal and say, well, look, it's good for the miners if other industries are organized. And so therefore, as miners try to help other workers in other industries organize, then they're also just only and narrowly benefiting their members. And, you could take that, and then I guess we're in agreement. We're just kind of saying different words. But what comes across when people say that, when people say that unions only benefit their members and they only work for their members, what comes across is that this person is putting forward a very narrow vision of unionism where, you do not look outside of your own local union halls when you think about what society ought to look like. And like I said, that is just simply not the historical place that unions have occupied in society. And it makes sense because of the structure of unions, right? Because the bedrock logic of unions and unionism is that we are stronger together. And so when you go through those collective struggles with people during contract campaigns, during union campaigns, you're standing up for one another, you're fighting for somebody that you don't know, that can and does change people. It changes their outlook. It gives them a more collective outlook. It breaks down individualism in, the kind of negative sense of only looking out for myself, right? If you see inside of your workplace the benefits of breaking down the view of individualism and fighting in a collective way, and it brings other people benefit and it brings you benefits and individually, then understandably and logically and not uncommonly, this results in a change in people. And they begin to see, they begin to have a collective outlook in other avenues of life. And they begin to want to flex their collective muscle and their collective power in other avenues. And that's why we see, universally, unions and labor movements that have success and that are able to organize a large number of workers begin to venture into politics and begin to try to sway the political process and make things more favorable, not just to their members, but also to the broader working class.
Oh, I'd also add a big thing that unions can do is affect wages for all workers.
Exactly.
So you got a union shop, they may change safety and wages for all the other even unrepresented, not paying their dues folks. Those benefits can benefit the entire industry even.
Right.
They can lift up wages for a whole industry. Just let alone one union could do that. So
right.
It's
yeah.
Whether they serve only their constituents in that union, they can have a big impact on the entire area.
Exactly. And I don't know that necessarily that he would disagree with that, but what I just want to get across to folks who are listening to that and to folks who have this kind of narrow view of unions is that actually unions do indirectly, by virtue of benefiting their members, benefit society and benefit communities, but they also consciously try to do things proactively to benefit the broader working class. Sometimes even potentially you could imagine at the expense of their members in the short term. And you can see this in the United Mine Workers of America supporting a clean, a just transition. There would be some people who would say narrowly that this might not be good for miners, but the UMWA only would support a just transition if there is adequate, retraining or compensation for people who will be losing their jobs. We're seeing, the UAW supporting a transition to electric vehicles because of the importance of combating climate change and things like this. It's important for folks to understand that, for people to understand unions' broader place in society, because that is kind of the place that unions and unionism has had in society in the past, and it did make society better. And now the retort will come, well, how do you feel about cop unions? I've heard him say this before when he said this is something that he said multiple times, is that unions only represent their members, and so they can be good and they can be bad. And the way that you can know that is by asking people who are generally in favor of unions how they feel about cop unions. And the response to that is that, yes, cop unions generally have a negative impact on society, unfortunately. But that is because of, their structural place in society and the bad actions of the cop union movement do not negate the fact that the vast majority of the labor movement does operate in the way that I'm saying. But, cop unions, unfortunately, do have this very, very, very narrow view of unionism, and they only look out for themselves very much at the expense of everybody else. Very much at the expense of everybody else. They do not have a broader, and this is, kind of universal, not necessarily universally true of cop unions. I don't want to speak too broadly, because you can always find an example. If you say 100% of something, you can always find a counterexample. But it is very, very commonly true that cop unions do not operate, in the public interest. They operate, oftentimes opposed to the public interest. And so, you just kind of have to look at the structural position of police in society, and you can kind of work your way through why that makes sense. And there's police are set up, the way that we've set up police in this country is that they are in opposition to the rest of society. So, you can understand why their unions would operate that way. But it is not it does not contradict the broader thesis of unions having a broader place in society beyond representing their members. Speaking of the UAW, Ford announced in a recent investors call that CEO Jim Farley's compensation rose 26% last year to $26.5 million. UAW President Shawn Fain responded by saying the following, quote, "Just a few weeks ago, Farley was crying to the press about how the UAW's record contracts were forcing the company to rethink the way they build their vehicles. But they have no problem finding the money to give him a 26% pay raise to $26.5 million a year. Let this be clear. This is corporate greed, plain and simple. All across the country, we are seeing greedy companies jack up prices to gouge the working class, while company executives and wealthy shareholders continue to lavish themselves with astronomical returns. The cause of inflation was not driven by policy. It was driven by corporate greed, and it has to stop. That's why workers across the country, and in particular in the South, are organizing to stand up and demand their fair share." And so this is really frustrating, as you're hearing all of this conversation about how the UAW overplayed its hand and how, people are going to lose jobs and all this kind of stuff. Because why, again? How did they overplay their hand? Because they got a 27% raise, not over 1 year, over 4.5 years. Over 4.5 years of the contract, they got a 27% raise.
It's trying to keep up with the CEO, right?
Yeah. And here the CEO got a 26% raise in a single year. And so, all of this stuff about the UAW overplaying its hand, workers are greedy, the union is greedy. It's all hogwash, because you can take a look at what the company is doing, and the company is, amid all of this stuff, they're talking about the potential for having to, cut jobs and all this stuff, while they radically, have I ever received in 1 year a 26% raise? I'm trying to think.
I was thinking about my 2% raise I got the other year. I was like, yeah, this is a little different.
I'm on, I was on a track position where, every over 4 years, I got a rather large raise every single year. And over the course of that 4 years, my salary doubled approximately. It approximately doubled. But that was, that was like a track position, and that was kind of baked in. But even over that, I don't think that I ever got a 26% raise. And I am not making millions of dollars for the government, right? So it's just the most bizarre kind of thing where you're seeing people continue to try to tell auto workers that they don't deserve more, that you need to shut up and take what you're given, while the people at the top who are not creating value for the company, who is only in there, because the shareholders voted him in, not because of the, the people who actually do the work have, confidence in him or anything like this.
Yeah, if all the shareholders went on strike, I wouldn't see a big change over here.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Just wanted to bring that to you so that, you've got a little bit of context as you continue, because you will continue to hear all of this stuff about, the unions are greedy, unions taking too much money. So, here's just another example of CEOs doing what they say that we can't do, and doing it worse than we ever could. Staying on the UAW, Daimler. They are beginning their negotiations with Daimler, and they're beginning their negotiations with Daimler in much the same way that the UAW began their negotiations with the big three auto workers. And so there was a big rally last week. Shawn Fain spoke for something like an hour, and I pulled two rather long clips, but I think it's worth it because the clips contain really good information about the status of Daimler and about the demands from the union. And just to preface this, so that you kind of have an idea of what we're going into, Daimler could afford to, just out of their profits, how much profits they've made, They could afford to double the compensation of all of their workers and not raise prices and still make a profit. Okay? So, you know, this is particularly, you don't want to buy any of this stuff about Daimler crying poor. So let's play this. Let's play this clip from Sean Fain about the status of Daimler today.
So let's break down those numbers. Again, doing what we did in Big Three bargaining, what we've done ever since, using facts. In this one chart, you can see the entire economic story of Daimler Truck over the past few years. Since 2018, Daimler Truck's profits have shot up 90%. That's right. In fact, in 2023 alone, Daimler amassed nearly $6 billion in profits. Business is absolutely booming. And what's Daimler done with those staggering profits? Yeah. It's sure as hell not going to workers, but let's talk about facts about where their profits have went. First off, Daimler Truck CEO, Martin Daum, who was just hired, by the way, in 2022, made sure he got his own cut of the company's massive pie. Daum received over $7.5 million in total compensation last year alone. His pay skyrocketed by more than 100%. You heard that right. Let me say that again for those of you in the back. Daimler Truck CEO Martin Daum got a 100% pay increase in 2023. As you can imagine, Mr. Daum is very excited about all these profits generated by your sacrifice. He recently gushed about Daimler's profits to the press. He said Daimler's profits were red hot and claimed that any leftover money certainly belongs to the company's stockholders. So that brings us to the next group of people that's benefited from your hard work. Daimler's rich shareholders. Last year alone, Daimler distributed $1.8 billion in dividends to their shareholders. And this year, they're planning to supercharge that handout by increasing shareholder dividends by 46%. That's right. Shareholders are getting a 46% pay increase. But it doesn't end there. Daimler's also funneling billions into stock buyback schemes that artificially inflate the value of the company's shares and further enrich the company executives and the top 1%. That's billions of dollars that have been robbed from the workers who generated those profits. That's billions of dollars that were not spent on the EV transition. That's billions of dollars being spent on mansions in faraway countries and yachts in private marinas and not being spent at the local businesses right here in North Carolina. So CEO Daum says Daimler profits are red hot. Well, let me tell you what else is red hot. The workers who've been left behind. Daimler workers who sweat and sacrifice, created all this wealth, they're actually in the negative. Between inflation that was brought on by corporate greed and consumer price gouging, inflation rising 24%, and the paltry wage bumps by Daimler workers that they've received since 2018, these workers have seen their buying power collapse by 13%. Daimler workers have lost ground, and they're in the negative compared to where they were just 6 years ago. So it's no wonder workers say they're falling behind and that things aren't the way they used to be. Because they're getting ripped off by greedy Daimler executives who are cashing in. These executives are cashing in, and they're sharing the spoils of your labor with wealthy shareholders. So think about that. With those kind of numbers, Daimler could double your wages, not raise prices, and still make billions of dollars. In fact, Daimler spent more enriching shareholders in just 1 year than the entire amount they spent in new money in our last contract.
That's wild. That is absolutely wild. More money in increasing shareholder dividends than new money for the workers in the entirety of the last contract, which was like 6 years for this one. I think this was a incredibly long contract. So there you go. That's kind of the status of things as far as how much money Daimler is making. And so they can obviously afford an incredible contract for the workers. And so this is what Shawn Fain and the UAW and the members at Daimler's are demanding at the bargaining table as negotiations opened this week.
I just want to take a minute and give you the very first bargaining update from the National Negotiating Team. Over the last 2 months, we circulated a bargaining survey that was completed by thousands of Daimler workers. We put together our demands, your demands, based off of your feedback. And this morning, we gave Daimler the most audacious and ambitious list of proposals they've seen in decades. And here's a sampling of the members' demands at Daimler Truck. No concessions. We're done going backwards. You know, a lot of times you hear bargaining described as a give and take. This membership is done giving. We are here to take. So your committee today, your negotiators, told management to save themselves the trouble and instead focus on how Daimler can improve lives of the workers and not roll back progress that's already been made. We told them record profits mean record contracts. We will only take a contract back to our members when that contract reflects the record profits generated by their sweat and their labor. That means record wage increases, company-wide profit sharing, and a cost of living allowance that protects our members' wages due to inflation. Daimler has compensated executives. They've enriched their shareholders with these record profits. Now it's time to invest in the workers. We want no tiers of wages or benefits. Workers at Daimler in Georgia, Tennessee, or North Carolina, just as other members of our union, are no longer tolerating tiered wages and benefits. This means we'll reject proposals that continue the practice of different pay or lower benefits for some members because of where they work or when they were hired or what they build. Our union rejects the tired lines that those who build buses should expect less than those who build trucks. Or those workers who work on EVs should expect less than those assembling diesel vehicles. It doesn't matter. There is no distinction in our union, and should be no distinction within a company raking in record profits. Our position is clear, and those days are over. We demand premium affordable health insurance for workers and our families. We demand protections when it comes to job security. It's way past time for Daimler to make new commitments to build products in our communities. Commitments that we will hold Daimler to by expanding the right to strike to protect our jobs and communities. So moving forward, our members will hold Daimler accountable. If they make a commitment to our members, then we expect them to keep it. That's right. We want to fight, and we demand the right of non-union Daimler employees to join the UAW free of intimidation. We know that our future lies in our numbers and our standing united. We get what we have the power to take. We know that every worker who joins us, every work site who organizes with us, makes us and them that much stronger. So not yet, union workers at Daimler plants and PDCs, know this. UAW means you are welcome. When we say you are welcome, we mean you are welcome to join our union, to take your seat at the table and win what you are owed. The thousands of UAW members at Daimler have demanded that the company respect you and not stand in your way as you come to take your place in this council. We demand more paid time off to be with families and recover from illness. We demand improved safety language to ensure the health and safety of every worker on every shift. Our workers sacrifice enough, and our expectation is that every worker return home as healthy as they did when they went into work, and we won't settle for nothing less. So there you have it. I just wanted to...
So there you have it. Eminently reasonable demands that would be life-changing for the workers if they're able to take them, and demands that the company can readily meet. So it will absolutely be up to them whether or not the workers go on strike, because you've got the list of things that they're demanding right there. All you have to do is meet them and they won't strike. So we'll see what Daimler decides to do. Unfortunately, our experience with companies is that they do not do the eminently reasonable thing and provide their workers with, decent standards of living and all of these things without some sort of serious threat or, going through on that threat of strike action. So we'll see what Daimler decides to do, but obviously, as you can tell, the demands are not unreasonable at all by the by the value that they're creating for the company. We'll see what happens. That's going to be it for us today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like the stream on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a 5-star rating if you're listening to us as a podcast. If you're listening to us on the radio, call the radio station and tell them that you appreciate them airing the Valley Labor Report. If you'd like to make a donation yourself to the program, tvlr.fm/donate is where you'll go to do that. If you'd like to buy our merch, you can go to tvlr.fm/store and do that. And tvlr.fm, you can subscribe to our newsletters, Last Week in Southern Labor and Who Gets the Bird. You'll get them in your inbox every single week. tvlr.fm/contact. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. See you next week.